Hi, everyone. Welcome to First and North. I'm Lou Canellis. Joining me this week on First and North. Let's bring up the crew. The voice of the Lions. There he is, Dan Miller. From Fox Milwaukee, Lily Zhao. And from Fox Minneapolis, Pierre Nugent. All right, we're just 2 days away from the NFL draft in Green Bay. Lily, how is Titletown looking right now for those of us that won't be making the trip?
Guys, it looks draft-tastic. Everything is going up. The draft stage, all the decor, the lighting. I mean, it doesn't really even look like Titletown anymore. It looks like the NFL draft came in and made itself at home, but it looks great, in my opinion. Yeah, it's through the Titletown district where all the fun stuff for fans will be. Of course, Lambeau Field at the center of it, and then the Resch Center, another big expo center, will also be utilized. So it's looking great, guys. They're, of course, kind of finishing everything up and leading up to the draft, but people are in town already. There's some rave reviews on what it looks like, and I'm excited to make my way up there, too.
Boy, good for you. Yeah, exciting times for those of you in Green Bay, Milwaukee, Detroit, Minneapolis, with the NBA playoffs going on as well. Here in Chicago, we just have the NFL draft, and we're jacked about it. I've got to stay with you, Lily, because last year's NFL draft in Detroit had the biggest turnout ever, blew away record numbers, monster, 775,000 fans showing up in Detroit. Dan talked about the energy that was in the city before and during the NFL draft. Lions president Ron Wood at Detroit's Economic Club said that there is no way Green Bay will come close. They'll finish second or third like they did last year. Lily, what's up with the Lions president taking a shot at the Pack?
Why has everybody got it against the Packers? I mean, come on. But, it's fair. He can say whatever he wants to say. Detroit did a phenomenal job. I can't knock them. The city, it was phenomenal. I wish I was there last year to experience it. I know you guys got the chance to. So I know Detroit really kind of set the bar really high for future drafts to come. And, of course, this one in Green Bay. So, again, I'm intrigued to see how it stacks up. Obviously, probably not 700,000 people coming to town, but I think expected 200 to 250,000 people through the 3 days. So, listen, it's going to have a different feel. It's a lot smaller than Detroit, as we know. So I'm intrigued to see kind of how the people, make their way in, what it looks like when it's all done, when everyone is kind of there around Lambeau Field. But, at the end of the day, anybody can say what they want. Detroit certainly, made things look really good, and they made it look easy, even though I know it was not. But so the Packers and the city of Green Bay certainly have a lot to kind of, hold up to, and we'll see how they do. But kind of curious to see if Mark Murphy, anybody else from the Packers, has anything to say about that.
Yeah, here in Chicago, listen, we have nothing to talk about. But it started really here in Chicago, so it's actually grown. We had 200,000 the first year, 250,000 in 2016. We thought it was a big deal back then because it was the first time the draft went on the road. We'll talk about the draft in a second. But I want to kick things off in Minnesota, where Vikings head coach Kevin O'Connell met the media yesterday. And Pierre, listen to this. He said that his QB1 is ready to hit the ground running.
We talked about JJ a little bit, but, I'd consider him full, really no limitations. Just once again, want to credit JJ for how he's handled really these last 2.5, 3 months or so, where I think he's ready to hit the ground running as of today.
All right, Vikings are ready to go all in on McCarthy. They still are looking for a backup quarterback. It sounded like O'Connell knows who he wants out there, Pierre. Can you give us any insight?
Well, I think he's keeping what he knows close to the vest in terms of what he wants for a backup. But when it comes to J.J. McCarthy, you heard the words right there, Lou, in terms of no limitations. That was really the big phrase that came out of yesterday's press conference. So there's no limitations for J.J. McCarthy returning from the knee injury. And that's certainly a great sign for the Vikings as they ramp up the voluntary offseason program and lead into the OTAs and minicamp coming up at the end of May and leading into June. So that's certainly a very positive sign for J.J. McCarthy. And even though they haven't anointed him as the starting quarterback, I don't really see anybody else on the roster right now that could challenge him. Now, of course, there is the Aaron Rodgers situation that has died down a little bit, and I'm not convinced that it is as much of a thing now as I thought it probably could have been about a month ago. But in terms of the backup role, you're looking around the league, there's still some names out there like Carson Wentz. If Ryan Tannehill comes back after not playing in the league last year, because we saw the likes of Joe Flacco and Drew Lock get signed last week, Are the Vikings potentially in the trade market? A guy like Sam Howell, they have very limited draft capital, as we know, and I'm sure we'll talk about that later. So via trade, I'm sure we'll have to be a future pick of some sorts. But right now, all signs point towards J.J. McCarthy being the starter going into next season.
All right, Pierre, dare I ask? Adam Schefter from ESPN mentioned that Kirk Cousins and the Vikings reunion still a possibility, but the Falcons right now are asking for teams to pay a hefty amount of Cousins guaranteed on his contract. Pierre, do you see the Vikes paying that big money to get Cousins and give up draft compensation?
It's really hard to see it from my perspective, Lou, because we talked about Aaron Rodgers as potentially being a quote-unquote distraction if he comes here to Minnesota. He'd bring a lot of headlines with him into Minnesota. Kirk Cousins doesn't draw that kind of ire, I don't think, from some people the way Aaron Rodgers does, but wouldn't Kirk Cousins be a little bit of a distraction if he's here in Minnesota? Because Kirk Cousins, he's got a no-trade clause, so he has to approve anywhere he goes if he's going to get traded. And anywhere he wants to go or sees as a potential good fit for him, he's going to want to go to that place and be the starter. Is that going to be the case here in Minnesota? I don't think so. And unless the Falcons eat up a hefty portion of that guaranteed money that's owed to Kirk Cousins, I don't really see the Vikings picking up the tab just to make Kirk Cousins a very expensive backup. So to me, it doesn't really make sense at this point. I wouldn't rule it out, but it doesn't really seem to make a lot of sense for me in this team.
You make good points. Speaking of Aaron Rodgers, he finally broke his silence this week. Hopped on the Pat McAfee show. Actually, it was last week, and he denied that he went to the Vikings and pitched the idea of mentoring J.J. McCarthy. But he did mention how the conversation with new head coach Aaron Glenn with the Gents went.
I think we're going to have this long conversation. I've flown across the country, and 20 seconds in, he goes, literally, I'm talking to the GM about something, and he leans to the edge of his seat and goes, "So do you want to play football?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm interested." And he said, "We're going a different direction at quarterback." And I said, and I was kind of shocked. Now, not shocked because I didn't think that was a possibility. Listen, of course, they want to move on. That's totally fine. But shocked because I just flew across country. You could have told me this on the phone. We just want to know how you want it released, the messaging. And I said, verbatim, I don't give a shit about the message. And I said, why? And then he said, I don't want to be up in front of the room saying something and have guys looking back at you. I said, you don't know me. And he said, you don't know me.
Dan Miller, I need to ask, are you surprised with the way Aaron Glenn handled that situation?
No, look, I can see Rodgers' point that it could have been handled in a phone call where you could have just said, we're not bringing you back. But then there also could have been Aaron Rodgers who might have come back after that and said, I don't even get a face-to-face meeting. So I don't know if there was a perfect way to do this. But the way that he describes that conversation is 100% the Aaron Glenn that I know. There's no wiggle room. He's going to do things the way he's going to do them. He'll listen, and he'll certainly work with people. But Aaron Glenn is set in his ways, and I think he wants to set the tone for this football team. And based on the reaction that I saw, I think this scored points with Jets fans. I think they were done with Aaron Rodgers. I think they liked the decisiveness that they got from their new head coach in this situation. And again, that just rings absolutely true to the Aaron Glenn that I have known, who was our defensive coordinator here since Dan Campbell came in as the head coach. And I think for the Jets, it's a clean cut. I think they move on, and I think this just kind of sets the tone for everybody who's going to be a Jet, that Aaron Glenn is in charge. Nobody else is going to be, as he said, sitting in the back of the room with other players looking at them for reaction. This is, I think, a nice statement for him early. It just doesn't work for Aaron Rodgers, but that's unfortunate.
Do you think Rodgers is going to play next season, or is he finished?
I still think he's going to play. I just feel like I do think he's a competitor. I do think he still feels like he can play. I don't think he likes the way things went, through an injury season and then through a tough season with the Jets. And I think Pittsburgh is still out there. And I've said on this show from the beginning that I thought that was probably the best place for him, because I just think that Pittsburgh brand and the culture that they have there is stronger than anything that Rodgers can do to bring it down. And I think Rodgers will respect that. And I think it gives him an opportunity to go in there with a perennial playoff team and see if he can get one last run as a quarterback in this league. And let's face it, Pittsburgh needs a quarterback right now. So it still makes sense for me that he ends up there. It doesn't seem like Tomlin is against it. I just think now the question is, it seems, at least from the outside looking in, when's Aaron Rodgers going to make that decision?
All right, speaking of the Steelers, check this out. Bears extended, by the way, T.J. Edwards last week. GM Ryan Poles met with the media today, saying he said an extension for All-Pro guard Joe Thuney is a priority, didn't put a timeline on it. I had the chance to sit down with Hall of Famer, NFL on Fox's NFL Sundays, Terry Bradshaw, and he believes, check this out, that the NFC North will be fun to watch this season.
We need Chicago. Fox needs Chicago to be a good football team, and they've not been that for a while now. So we need the Bears back, and I think this is going to listen. Now you got the Vikings, you got Green Bay, you got Detroit and Chicago. The NFC North now is going to be one of the most exciting divisions in all of football, because you've got really good quarterbacks. Well, Minnesota switched their guy out, but for the most part, you got really good quarterbacks, and it's going to be fun to watch.
Now, we sure hope so here in this town. Doesn't sound like TB is all in on J.J. McCarthy yet, but he's 100% behind Caleb Williams and the Bears hiring of Ben Johnson as well. Bradshaw also had some advice for the Bears front office when deciding between drafting Ashton Genty or going offensive line. We're going to get to that later on in the show. I want to get back to Green Bay. Lily, Packers GM Brian Gutekunst said yesterday that if they had to go play next week, feels really good about the roster and the ability to win. Does that include Jaire Alexander on the roster right now?
For now, it does, right? He did say verbatim, we're going to work through it with Jaire. He's still on the team for a reason. Again, if they were going to trade him, they want to find some good value. But right now, it just seems like Jaire, his agents, the Packers are trying to work something out. And we will see what the future does hold for Ja. Again, they're going to see what happens after the draft. I think it'll be kind of indicative of how the Packers go about drafting players that potentially could lead to where Jaire does stand with this team moving forward. As of now, Jaire has had some offseason workouts with their Pro Bowl safety, Xavier McKinney, in the offseason. Jordan Love has had some complimentary things to say about his cornerback as well. So it seems like the guys are in his corner. It's just a matter of, again, if he stays in Green Bay this fall or if there's a move to be made before the season does begin. Yeah,
working out with McKinney. Who knows? Maybe they're building a relationship and Alexander sticks around. We need to take a timeout. We dig deep into the NFL draft coming up. We'll break down the draft history of the four teams, and I'll give you the Bears mock draft when we come back here on First and North.
Dr. Larson has no recollection of the last 8 years.
Doc is TV's best new medical drama.
I need to know.
And you can watch it anytime.
I will be a doctor again.
Doc, all new Tuesdays on Fox, and watch anytime on Hulu.
Welcome back to First and North. Lou Canellis at our Fox 32 studios in Chicago. Dan Miller is in Detroit at Fox. Lily Zhao in Milwaukee at Fox. And Pierre Nugent at Fox Minneapolis. All right, let's dig into the NFL draft right now with the draft 2 days away on Thursday. As mentioned, not much movement trade-wise. Bears GM Ryan Poles earlier today said he expects a lot to happen on draft day. Are you guys surprised? And I'll ask you, Pierre, first. Are you surprised that there hasn't been any trade so far in the draft?
I'd say a little bit surprised at this point, because in the past we've seen a lot of movement leading up to the draft, especially 2 days before the draft. So, yes, I am a little surprised. However, I'm not surprised in the sense that it doesn't feel like there are a lot of teams that are sold on any of these other quarterbacks once you get past Shedeur Sanders. I know there's talk about Jackson Dart. I know Quinn Ewers is in that conversation as well. You know, there's several other quarterbacks that are in this year's class that everybody has mixed opinions on. So because of those mixed opinions, I'm not really surprised that there hasn't been that much movement, because it seems like people are a little bit gun shy about giving up too much for questionable quarterback talent.
I always say it's the season of lying and misdirection. So I don't believe anything I'm hearing right now from those GMs. Last week you said that this is a huge draft for the Vikings since they haven't had the best of drafts over the years. So the Vikings have only picked 24th twice in franchise history. Let's look at the 24th pick over the last couple of years. Back-to-back defensive backs were picked with the 24th selection, but the trend is offensive players in 4 of the last 6 drafts. What do you think right now, Pierre? Are the Vikings going to go offense or defense with that number 24 pick?
I've been saying it for weeks now, and I'll say it again. I think defensive back is where this team is probably looking right now, whether it's corner or whether it's safety. And I think if they do stay at 24, I'm more inclined to believe that defense is the direction that they're going to go in because they were able to plug a lot of those holes, particularly on the offensive line via free agency. So when you're looking at that back end of the defense at the safety position on the outside corner, I think that's where Minnesota ends up picking if they do stay at 24.
All right, building the trenches. It's been a point of emphasis for the Bears this offseason. And right now, they're hoping that they found 6 new starters on both the offensive and defensive lines. At 10, it's been an offensive player the last 5 drafts. Only 2 defensive players have been taken since 2013. 10th pick, by the way, has been traded the last 4 drafts. It's typically a Big Ten or an SEC player. Only 1 running back and tight end have been drafted 10th since 2000. What does draft expert Todd McShay think the Bears may end up with? Listen in.
And then the team that could benefit from all of this, if it winds up playing out, that Ginty doesn't go 6 and Ted McMillan goes 5, how about the Bears sitting at 10, Rich? I mean, could they, even 72 hours ago, I don't think anyone in that office would have thought we could be looking at a scenario where we've got Tyler Warren and Ashton Ginty that we have to choose from at number 10, right? Like, this is going to be fun, man.
No way.
All right, McShay was on with Rich Eisen. Here's my Bears mock draft, and I'm going to go first since the Bears are picking 10th, and the 3 of you are going to be picking around, 24, and I know the Lions, 28. I've talked to Ryan Poles one-on-one. Listen to him today when he said that the Bears plan on extending offensive lineman Joe Thuney. And I've reviewed Poles' 3 previous drafts, all right? The man is not scared to make draft day deals. He did so for Justin Fields. Poles unloaded the number 1 pick to Carolina for the gift that keeps giving. And if Ashton Ginty, Tyler Warren, Will Campbell, or Mason Graham somehow are still there, yeah, he'll grab them. But if they're all gone, when it's Poles' turn at number 10, I think Poles will deal again and trade down. Poles in 3 years has traded down on draft day 7 times. He's traded up just once. And I think the Bears will stick with a pick between 12 and 20 in a trade down when they could grab a Kelvin Banks Jr. to help out on the offensive line if he's still available. Poles could take a pass rusher, such as Shamir Stewart from Texas A&M. Maybe grab a running back who they really see fitting in with a DeAndre Swift. Or, and I really love this pick, they could select tight end Colston Loveland, who just may be a better fit than Tyler Warren alongside Cole Kmet in the Bears offense. I think Loveland is a catch-first tight end, a little bit better than Warren when it comes to catching the football. Ben Johnson loves the 2 tight end set. We saw it in Detroit. The Bears need another pass catcher with Keenan Allen gone. And also, I wouldn't be surprised that as part of the trade, maybe the Bears get themselves a starter on that defensive line. We haven't heard much about Trey Hendrickson lately. I could see the Bears trading down, getting more picks between 15 and 80. Then I see the Bears trading up, and Ryan Poles and his staff love the depth of the 2nd and 3rd rounds. They've had great success in the 2nd round as well. Let's go to the host city, Green Bay. Packers still haven't drafted a wide receiver in the 1st round since 2002 in Javon Walker. Lily, wide receivers, Brian Thomas, Jordan Addison, they were selected at number 23 the last couple of drafts. Leans more offense over the last 6 years. What are your thoughts on what the Packers might do?
Yeah, I know wide receiver will be tantalizing for Packers fans. I think that's kind of what they want to, that's the direction they want to go, right? Ted McMillan from Arizona, Matthew Golden from Texas. Those guys had some pre-draft visits in Green Bay. The Packers really hold a lot of weight with these pre-draft visits. Brian Gutekunst's one of the only GMs at McMillan's pro day his workout as well. So there is some interest there, but knowing the history of the Packers, defense always kind of is on the forefront of their minds, especially in drafts by Brian Gutekunst, their GM. So I'm kind of expecting the Packers at 23, if they do stand pat, to get a guy like Shamar Stewart. I think this Packers defense needs pressure up front. They need guys to get after the quarterback. I think this is a very good defensive edge or defensive tackle group in the draft. So I say, why not go out there and get you a premier player up front that will help everybody on the line for Green Bay? So I think they go in the direction of an edge player with their first pick if they stay at 23. But I know wide receiver, that's a very tantalizing option, but I think defense might be the pick for the Packers.
All right, I want to wrap up this segment with Dan in Detroit. Lions have only picked 28 just one other time in their long history. Back in 2015, they selected, boy, this is a name from the past, Dan, Laken Tomlinson. Over the last few weeks.
Still around.
Wow, yeah. You've stressed the defensive side of the football. All the mocks align with that as well. Defensive players have been picked in 6 of the last 7 drafts at that number 28. You still see defense for the Lions?
I see defense, but I see line. I see trenches, because I think if you look at a guy like Tyler Booker, an interior offensive lineman from Alabama, Gray Zabel from North Dakota State, those guys certainly fit what the Lions might be looking for, guys that can work inside. They lost Kevin Zeitler. Glasgow didn't have a terrific year last year, but then I think the edge is probably the same group that Lily was talking about, a guy like Michael Williams. Here's what I would say is keep an eye on Brad Holmes. If I had to wager on a move one way or the other, where you're thinking the Bears might trade back, I think the Lions could trade up. I just think they feel good about their depth chart to the point where I think they'd give up some capital if they see a player that they want to go up and get, like they did last year with Terrion Arnold. And that's what I'm keeping my eye on. I still think it'll be trenches. But I also think that when you're talking about Holmes and you're talking about Campbell, they really narrow the scope in terms of guys that they like. And if it means going up to get somebody, I believe they'll do that.
Speaking of Brad Holmes, he comes your way right after this final timeout here on First and North.
Stroop Store is known for cheese, laundry, and bowling.
You gotta be kidding me.
Going Dutch, all new Thursdays on Fox.
When like a movie comes out, right? Like, I don't understand. When you go to see a movie, you don't know what the movie, you've never seen the movie. That's the excitement. And so you're fine just watching the movie. And it is whether the movie's good or bad, and then you can do that. But I don't understand why people can't just watch the draft. And it's like, all right, like, I don't know what's going to happen, but watch the draft and get your popcorn ready.
I think this one's going to be a little wild.
It could get wild, Brad. It could get wild. Sit back and watch.
What do you think, Lily? Is this draft going to be wild?
I absolutely think so. I think there's going to be a lot of hopefully fun trades that we get to see and teams kind of one-upping each other to get the best draft pick. I'm kind of curious to see the Packers trade up, but I think it's going to be a very fun first round and a really, really tantalizing draft as a whole. So I agree with what these guys are saying. I think it's going to be a very wild draft in Green Bay.
I'm with you. Finally, did any of you see our fearless new leader here in town, Ben Johnson, throw out the first pitch at the Cubs game last weekend? Not bad right there. Pretty good velocity, Dan Miller. Good location, even dropped. I think he threw a sinker. Tigers fans on social media, Dan, saying that, hey, maybe Johnson should come back because the Tigers could use a closer. Maeda's just not doing the job these days.
Hey, listen, former quarterback at North Carolina. I've watched him throw a football. He can still sling it. It doesn't surprise me at all that he can throw a baseball like that. And I appreciate a guy who goes out there and takes a full warm-up as well, or full wind-up as well. So that didn't shock me at all. I know what kind of arm he's got.
He looked like he belonged throwing that first pitch. All right, Lily, I want you to have a great time this weekend. Good luck to you guys in Minneapolis, Pierre, with the Vikings. Dan, I know you'll have fun with it in Detroit. Great show as always. For Dan, Lily, and Pierre, I'm Lou Canellis. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the draft. We will break down the picks when we see you next week, right here on First and North.